Hello, my name is Joel Harrison, and this is my final project demo for CS 4900 at Ohio University. This is game engine design. Um, for my final project, I decided to replicate the board game Battleship, but within our game engine. I did this utilizing some free models I found online. Unfortunately, these models did not come textured, and I ran out of time before I was able to actually figure out how to add custom textures onto them. So sadly, it doesn't have the same look as I would have liked it, and everything's still untextured. It's also using a MGUI, Dear MGUI, to handle all user interactions and user inputs, and it is using that within conjunction of the net messages to send that information from client to client and get the guessing down and be able to play the game. Alrighty, so I'm going to hop into the demo now. So as you probably know, there are basically two phases within the game Battleship. There's the setup phase where you're actually placing your boats onto the board, and then there's the guessing phase where you take turns going back and forth guessing the position of the opponent's boats. So I'm going to go ahead and show off the setup. Um, so in here, got a little window for moving the pieces and also selecting what boat you want to move around and place. So you can place the model, and using each of these buttons you can move them around. One of the biggest challenges was getting the model to not be able to walk off of the board or even be able to rotate off of the board. I solved this by creating a mapping basically of labeling each tile of the board in conjunction with the XY coordinates of them, and basically just checking, instead of checking the position of the model, I would just check the mapping label and use that to make sure that you can't move off the board. So you can't go too far forward, can't move off to the left, even though I'm clicking, won't go forward, and also all sides are covered. Um, Another challenge that was kind of tricky to get right was the collision detection between the different ships. I was struggling for a while to figure out how to not let the player overlap the boats, but using the mapping I mentioned previous, I was able to figure out the exact tiles that each one was covering and do a quick simple check to make sure that none of the boats were basically overlapping on the same tiles. So there's also a done button once you finish placing all your boats, and it won't do anything unless you have all of the boats placed. So that's just a quick check to make sure that you're not trying to cheat and not place a boat. But once you have them all placed, you can press the done button and it will send all the positions to the other client to be able to check against if it was a hit or a miss. I'll just quickly do the same setup on this client. And you can see the boats are there too. And if I push done on both of them, now you can see one of the players, whoever's turn it is to guess, has access to the next phase. Alrighty, so for the next phase, this would be the play phase. Whoever's turn it is will have the option to select the show board checkbox, and that will pull up the entire board grid of places that you can take a guess. Um, so if they push any of these squares, it should put a peg up on the top of the board uh, to indicate where they have guessed, and it will send that information to the other client. And uh, using the mapping I mentioned previously, there's actually two. There's one for the top and one for the bottom. It will take the square, the label of the square that was pressed, and basically convert it to the position of the bottom, and using that it will be able to place a peg on the bottom of the other client to show where their opponent has guessed at. So if I go ahead and press A1 here, you can see that it sticks a pointier peg. That's to indicate that it was a miss and there was no ship hit there. And then it switches over to this player has the option to show the board and take their guess. So if I do the same square here on this client, there is a boat on A1, so you should be able to see the hit model pop up there. You can see it's a little more rounded to show that was a hit. Ideally, I would have liked these to be textured and one to be like blue and one to be red to further indicate if it was a hit or miss, but there is some differentiation between the two as it stands. So yeah, I'll just go through a couple turns here and show off what it looks like. See that it puts on each. And essentially, that is Battleship. That is most of the functionality that is implemented yet, and each player would take turns going back and forth until one player has no more boats that have not been hit. Really quickly, I'd like to just kind of expand on the big breakthrough I had in this project, which I've mentioned a couple times now, was creating the mapping between the label of each tile to the XY position or the ZY position for the top board. This was not only important for the boundary detection, but also I was able to use this to get the range of what each of the boat was sitting on, the range of tiles they were on. This allowed me to accurately determine whether or not a guess would have been a hit or a miss. It let me check for boat collisions, and it really just clicked a lot of things in project, and it was a huge breakthrough. Just to run through how I did this real quick, I had a vector of all the letters on the board, so A through M, since it's a 13 by 13 board. I would concatenate that with the index plus 1 since it's starting at 0. Also grab the start or the Y and X position and make a pair of these floats. And then I would further pair those up with the label of the string and push this onto the map. And then after that, I would decrement the Y position after each loop on this one, and decrement the X after each loop of the inner loop, and reset the Y back to its starting position for the next row. So this, like I said, was really helpful, especially for boundaries, because now I could just check the range that the boat was on and see if it was on any of the maybe top tiles, if it was moving forward, and just update the positions of all the boats, and also just check for collisions or if it was going to walk off the map. So while this might not have been the most creative project ever made, I think it was still a lot of fun to design, and I think that it was just really, really fun to learn how to get this information to communicate from both client to client. It was it's a lot more than the original net message module that I worked with. So I had a couple challenges sending this information back and forth and getting all the logic to work out. So I think overall it was a very, very fun project that I learned a lot from. Hope you enjoyed my demo.